She said she was hiding our memories there. But I found something else. I'd been looking forward to this hot spring afternoon for weeks. A quiet Saturday with my wife Emily, putting the finishing touches on the pastel blue nursery for our baby boy. The smell of fresh primer mingled with the late blossoming cherry trees outside, and for a moment I felt an unshakable peace. As I climbed down from the ladder, wiping paint from my forehead, Emily slipped out of the room, promising to fetch the new lampshade from our storage closet. She flashed that mischievous grin and whispered, "I hid our memories in that old wooden crate. You'll love the surprise." I laughed it off, but the idea tugged at my curiosity. When her footsteps didn't return after several minutes, I set down my roller and approached the battered crate tucked beneath the window. The crate was exactly the kind of keepsake box we'd bought on our road trip through Shenandoah last summer, rustic, weathered, and perfect for storing the little treasures of a young relationship. I remembered how, on our 1-year anniversary, we'd filled it with ticket stubs from our first concert, Polaroids from our date in Georgetown, and letters we'd exchanged during those brutal months of long distance. We'd promised to open it together, on a day when the world felt ready for our next chapter. Today, though, the latch seemed almost too eager to give way under my fingers. I pulled the lid open with a creak, expecting tiny baby onesies or our old scrapbooks. Instead, a stack of envelopes greeted me, pale pink, cream, and sky blue, with her name scrawled across each in flowing script. My heart pounded as I lifted the top envelope. It tore open easily, revealing a photograph of Emily in someone else's arms, standing beneath a neon sign in Las Vegas. The back read 03/12/2024, scrawled in her handwriting. Cold dread swept through me as I dropped the photo into my lap and shuffled through the rest. Postcards from Sedona, hotel receipt stubs from a city 4 hours away, and more Polaroids. Her smiling face pressed against a man I'd never met. I sank to the floor, crate tipping at an angle that threatened to spill more evidence. The half-painted walls of the nursery felt like they were closing in on me, every shade of blue suddenly tainted. I remembered the morning she told me she was pregnant, how the sunlight had danced on her hair, how she'd cried with joy, and how I'd promised to protect her heart forever. Now I sat among the scraps of betrayal, wondering which pieces of our fairy tale had been nothing but illusions. Each letter I unfolded felt like a blow. In one, she'd written about stolen afternoons and whispered promises of a life that wasn't mine. In another, she confessed that she'd needed something real outside our marriage, that she felt suffocated by my steady, predictable love. The final envelope contained a small voice memo on a flash drive, his voice tender and intimate, calling her love, laughing at jokes I had never heard. I pressed play on my phone, and his words filled the empty nursery, as if the walls themselves were complicit in keeping her secret. I must have sat there for a long while, breathing in the lingering scent of cherry blossoms from the open window, willing the room to make sense again. The sun dipped lower, turning the paint on the walls into a dull facsimile of hope. I heard Emily's soft knock on the door, the way she always knocked when she had good news to share. "James, you almost done?" she called, voice light. My knuckles whitened around the flash drive as I rose, dusting paint chips from my jeans. I straightened up, my reflection in the nursery mirror a ghost of the man who had believed in forever. Turning toward the hallway, I felt the blue primer cold against my bare arms, the photo of her and him burning through my mind. I knew I couldn't pretend ignorance any longer. Whatever I said next had to carve a path through the wreckage of our dreams. But with each step, the nursery door felt heavier, as though the walls themselves held their breath, waiting for the moment I'd unveil the truth and decide what would become of the memories she claimed to love so much. I turned the knob with a trembling hand, the nursery door swinging open on squeaky hinges. She stood there with that same nervous smile, her eyes bright as if she'd just baked cookies. Behind her, the soft afternoon light painted the room a gentle glow, like nothing had changed. I felt my voice catch. "Hey," I said, trying to keep it casual. My heart felt like it was lodged in my throat. "You're back? Did you find the lampshade?" Her brow furrowed, and for a split second I saw panic flicker across her face. Then she crossed the threshold and set the lampshade on the dresser. "Yeah," she replied, voice light but eyes darting. Got it. Wow, looks amazing in here. She ran a hand over the half-finished wall. I forced a smile, closed the crate with all the subtlety of a clanging cymbal, and skirted around to stand beside her. Emily, can we talk about something? My voice was steady, but under my words her name tasted like betrayal. Her eyes widened and she nodded. Sure, what's up? I gestured toward the crate at her feet. Tell me why you hid all this in here. Her face went pale. She muffled a gasp, then turned away toward the window, hands clasped behind her back. James, her voice cracked. You weren't supposed to see that. See what, Emily? I tried to keep my tone calm, but heat rose in my cheeks. Photos of you with Miles in Vegas? Receipts from that hotel in Sedona? Letters talking about stolen afternoons with him? I slid a photo across the dresser, her hand on his chest, her eyes alight with something I'd never seen when I looked at her. She closed her eyes, inhaled sharply, and backed away. It's not what you think. That line felt like a blade twisting in my gut. It's exactly what I think, I said. My voice rang out, louder than I intended, echoing off the bare walls. You lied to me for months. You told me you were working late at the clinic. You told me you loved me. Her eyes glistened with tears. I do love you, James. I never stopped loving you. Then why? I pressed. Why hide these? What about our memories, our plans for this baby? She turned fully, ducking her head as tears fell. I was scared, she whispered. I didn't know how to feel. Pregnant, engaged, planning a life I thought I wanted. Miles, he made me feel alive again. A laugh, hollow and bitter, escaped me. Alive? Do you realize how alive I felt when I met you? When I opened that box for the first time? I thought we were building something real. You are, she burst out. You are real. But I'm confused, James. I loved him before I met you. I thought I could leave that part of my life behind. I shut my eyes, shaking my head. The letters spilled through my mind again. I need something real. How many times had she used that phrase? It sounded like a mantra to justify tearing my world apart. Confused? Emily, I'm the one who's confused. Am I not enough? My voice cracked. The question hung between us, heavier than the half-painted crib. She swallowed. You are enough. You've always been more than enough. But this baby, it scared me. Responsibility, marriage, a future that's so permanent. Miles offered escape. The word escape stung. Escape from me? Escape from us? I felt my chest tighten. So you ran away with him in your head, in letters and photos, while I was here painting walls for our son. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs. I thought I could keep it separate. I planned to end it before you found out. I even broke it off once, but he tracked me down. Emily, she closed the distance, reaching for my arm. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I yanked my arm away. It did. It got this far. Anger and sorrow warred inside me. Part of me wanted to hurt her, to make her feel this pain. Another part just wanted to collapse and cry. You have every right to hate me, she whispered. I'm sorry. I broke your trust. I don't expect you to forgive me. I stared at her for a long moment, the distance between us, a chasm so wide I wasn't sure how to cross it. Then I looked around at the nursery, the crib half assembled, the paint dripping in spots, the stuffed giraffe in the corner waiting to be hugged. Our son, our baby, would be born into this, into the aftermath of her secrets. My breath came fast. I don't know if I can forgive you, Emily, but I know I have to figure out what comes next. For me, for our son. She nodded, tears still falling silently. I understand. I turned toward the door, feeling the weight of every photograph, every envelope pressing against my back. I climbed back down the ladder, ignoring the slap of paint under my feet, and paused in the hallway. The late afternoon light through the nursery window caught her silhouette one last time before I closed the door behind me. Outside, the world felt impossibly bright, as if it couldn't bear the grief and guilt spilling from that room. I drew a shaky breath. I needed space. Space to decide whether I could ever trust again, whether I could face her in that nursery, surrounded by the ghosts of her deceit. I stepped into the hallway, the door to our future closing behind me, and wondered if it would ever open the same way again. The couch was lumpy and cold, every crease in the cushions pressing uncomfortably into my spine. When I finally drifted off, it was under the weight of exhaustion and heartbreak, fitful dreams of Emily's laughter dissolving into cold stares and whispered apologies. I woke to the faint glow of streetlights filtering through the curtains. 3:15 a.m., if I trusted my phone's locked screen. I turned sideways, propping my head on a faded throw pillow, and found the nursery door ajar. A sliver of pale blue showed where the hallway light caught the edges. I sat up, brushing a hand through my hair, still damp with sweat from an anxious nightmare. For a moment I debated going back, closing the door, sealing off the memories, but something made me push myself upright and stand. The house was silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My bare feet padded along the hardwood floors, cool and unfamiliar without the cushion of socks. At the nursery threshold, I saw her silhouette crouched by the crib, one hand resting on the mattress. Emily's hair was loose, falling over her shoulders in a dark curtain. She wasn't crying. The way she held herself felt quiet, tentative, like she was afraid to break the spell of that stillness. "James," she whispered without turning. Her voice was raw, thinner than I'd ever heard it. I swallowed, crossed the room, and leaned against the doorframe. "What are you doing up?" She stood, smoothing her nightshirt with trembling fingers. Blue primer dust clung to her palms. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I kept thinking about the crate, about Miles, about us, about our son." She looked at the crib like it held all our hopes in its woven bars. "I'm so sorry." We stood there, the three of us unspoken in that shadow-lit room. For a long minute I felt the urge to bolt, to run until every trace of this betrayal was behind me. But I didn't move. I found myself whispering, "Why now?" She breathed deeply. I needed to see him. I needed to see what I'd done. She stepped aside, revealing the tiny mattress, the crisp sheet embroidered with little sailboats. "I love him already. This child. I want to be the kind of mother who doesn't hide things in crates." Her shoulders sagged. A tremor ran through her lips. "I know I shattered your trust. I know I hurt you." "I can't pretend you didn't," I said, voice low. "But I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest. No more letters, no more hiding." She nodded, dark eyes shiny. "Tell me what you need." I pushed off from the doorframe and crossed to her side. The nursery felt smaller now, too close, as if the walls themselves were closing in on us. "I need to know why," I said. "Not because I want to punish you, but because I need to understand how this happened. How you could look at me, at this room, and choose someone else." Her breath caught. "I was lost, James. After my father died last year, I felt like my compass broke. You were my anchor, but I felt stuck. Miles offered direction. I know that's no excuse." She closed her eyes. "I was selfish and I was weak." I swallowed past the ache in my throat. "You were scared," I said, more to affirm my own understanding than to accuse. "Afraid of this life we planned, but you never told me." She reached for my hand, tentative. I was ashamed. I thought if I admitted it, you'd hate me. And then I met him again, by accident, and all those old doubts came flooding back. I stared at her palm against mine, the paint smudged between our fingers. "So you hid our memories," I said. She nodded. "I thought if I kept those letters, those photos, maybe I could remember who I was before I met you. But keeping them only tore us apart." The honesty in her eyes hit me like a fresh wound. Something shifted in the hush of that room. Grief and regret mixing with a fragile hope. I drew a shaky breath. "I want to try," I said. "I want us to be honest, to face the work ahead. I don't know if I can ever forget, but maybe I can forgive, if you're willing to earn it back, piece by piece." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she leaned into me. "I'll do whatever it takes," she whispered. "Counseling, open logs on my phone, whatever you need. I don't care how long it takes." We stood there in the dim nursery, two fractured hearts seeking a way forward. The baby's future glimmered between us. The promise of new life, new beginnings. And though the road would be long, filled with doubts and hard conversations, I realized that this moment, this raw, broken moment, was where real healing had to begin. We didn't have answers yet, but we had the truth. And for now, that had to be enough. The dawn light crept through the blinds, splintering across the quilt where I slept on the couch. I woke with a stiff neck and Emily beside me on the love seat, her shoulders rising and falling in exhaustion. We hadn't spoken last night after our fragile truce in the nursery, each of us too raw for words. Now, as the sky lightened to pale gray, I realized the weight of what we'd agreed to. Honesty, transparency, work. And I felt a knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. I swung my legs over the side of the couch and sat up, careful not to wake her. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. 2 missed calls from Michael, an email confirmation for couples counseling at the clinic downtown, and a text from Emily. "Are you up?" My thumb hovered over read before I set the phone face down and stood. I found her in the kitchen, silhouetted against the stainless steel appliances, cradling a mug of tea. Her hair was twisted into a loose bun, and she looked exhausted but determined. I poured coffee into the chipped mug Michael had given me last year, still stamped with "Number 1 Dad," and joined her at the linoleum table. "Morning," I said softly, handing her the tea. She nodded, taking a slow sip. "Morning," she replied, voice husky. I didn't sleep much either. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Counseling is at 10, I said. "You still want to go?" She set her mug down and reached for my hand. "Yes, I want to do this for us and for our son." She hesitated, searching my eyes. "Are you okay going together?" I nodded, grateful for her straightforwardness. "I am." I realized how much it meant that she'd asked. She wasn't assuming I'd follow her path. She was inviting me to join her. "I'll pick you up at 9. We dressed in silence, slipping on shoes and gathering our jackets. Outside, the morning air was crisp, a promise of spring's arrival. Traffic was light as I drove us to the clinic, a nondescript building with frosted glass and a small sign that read, "Dr. Marissa Cole, MFT." In the waiting room, we sat side by side but didn't touch. We watched a fish tank bubble in the corner. The goldfish circled aimlessly, untroubled by their glass boundaries. A friendly receptionist led us to a small office where Dr. Cole greeted us with a warm smile and offered water. Her presence was calm, practiced. "Thank you both for being here," she said. "I know this is hard." She invited us to sit across from her, and I felt like I was stepping onto a stage, exposed under the soft glow of an overhead lamp. She began with questions: what we hoped to gain, what felt broken. Emily spoke first, voice steady but quiet, telling Dr. Cole about her fear of permanence, the guilt over her affair, her longing to make things right. Then it was my turn. I found myself describing the moment I opened the crate in the nursery, the way my world spun, the sense that everything I believed in had been a lie. My voice shook, but I didn't look at Emily. I felt her hand brush mine under the table, a small tether to the woman who'd shattered and now wanted to rebuild. Dr. Cole guided us through an exercise. Each of us would share one thing we loved about the other and one wound we carried. Emily started. "James, I love how you planned every detail of our lives together. You made me feel safe. My wound is that I couldn't forgive myself for feeling trapped, so I escaped." Her words landed between us like fragile glass. I swallowed and spoke next. "Emily, I love your laughter. It lights up every room. My wound is that I can't stop feeling betrayed, even in moments when you're being the woman I fell in love with." I closed my eyes, letting the admission seep into my bones. The session lasted an hour. We practiced communication drills and learned to spot the small moments when mistrust crept in. By the end, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter for having shared the burden of my pain, heavier with the knowledge that trust would take months, perhaps years, to rebuild. On the drive home, the radio played a soft folk song about second chances. Emily reached over and placed her hand on mine. "Thank you for coming with me," she said. I glanced at her, hair pulled back, sunlight catching the loose strands. For a moment, she looked like the woman I married. "I'm glad we did it," I replied, squeezing her hand gently. I wasn't sure where this road would lead, but for the first time in weeks, I felt we were moving forward together. When we stepped into the house, the nursery door stood slightly ajar, light spilling through. We paused there, looking back at the room where so much pain had been unearthed. I took a deep breath. There were letters in that crate still waiting to be read. Letters we'd agreed to share openly, without secrets. I would face them, line by line, not as evidence of her betrayal, but as the bruised confession of a woman learning how to be honest again. And maybe over time, I could learn how to forgive. The next few days felt like walking through fog. We fell into a new rhythm. Morning coffee together at the kitchen table, midday texts to check in, evenings at counseling. But outside those structured moments, everything else felt unsteady, as though the ground beneath us might give way at any time. On Wednesday afternoon, I stood in the nursery again, the pale blue walls now finished, the crib fully assembled. I'd cleared a space on the carpet beside the wooden crate and sat cross-legged, its lid resting by my side. Emily hovered at the doorway, her hands twisted anxiously in the hem of her shirt. "I'm here," she said softly, as though afraid I might disappear. I nodded but didn't look up. Inside the crate lay the letters and photos, the raw, unfiltered evidence of her affair. I'd agreed to read them, to hear her truth, but as I stared at the first envelope, my throat closed. I couldn't tell if I was more afraid of what she'd written or what my own reaction might be. "It's okay if you're not ready," she whispered, crossing over to sit beside me. She offered her hand, and I finally took it, the faint residue of paint smudging our palms together. "I need to understand," I said. "But I'm scared of what I'll feel when I see her handwriting." She closed her eyes and leaned her head against my shoulder. "Read them at your own pace. I'll be right here." I picked up the cream-colored envelope dated April 2nd, 2024, and slid it open. The first lines were familiar. She always began with the date and a heading like, "To the one who knows me best." But these words weren't addressed to me, to the one who ignited the spark I thought I'd lost. My chest constricted as I read on. She described how meeting Miles again in that coffee shop had resurrected a part of her she thought buried. She wrote of guilt, of moments she knew were wrong but couldn't resist. She ended every letter with, "I'm sorry, but I needed to feel alive." I closed the envelope, choking back the hot sting of tears. Emily's breath was soft against my ear. "How could you write these?" I whispered. "How could you keep them?" She sighed. "They were my confession, James. I never intended you to read them. They were for me, to remind me why I almost walked away." Her voice trembled. "I wrote them because I was terrified of facing what I'd done, but I needed to remember my shame so I wouldn't repeat it." I laid the letter in my lap and picked up the next, dated March 15th. This one was longer, full of portraits of intimacy, stolen mornings together while my back was turned in our marriage. The way he kissed her knuckles, the way her heart raced when he whispered her name. Each word was a blade twisting in my flesh, revealing not just the act of betrayal, but her deepest longing for something I couldn't give, or so she thought. The room felt too small, the silence too loud. I pressed my forehead against the crate for a moment, trying to steady myself. "I never saw it," I choked out. "I thought our love was enough." She reached for me, but I held up a hand. "I still love you," I said, though it sounded foreign on my tongue. "But understanding this, it hurts so much." "I know," she said, voice thick, "and I'll carry that guilt forever. But I need you to see the whole picture." I nodded and dipped into the stack again, pulling out a photograph from February. Emily and Miles at a beach, her arms around him, her head tossed back in laughter. The back said simply, Feb 14th, 2024, Freedom. I traced the date with a trembling fingertip. 2 months before she confessed to me she was pregnant. 2 months she was seeing him. I laid the photo face down and exhaled a shuddering breath. "Why didn't you tell me then?" I asked, voice hollow. She closed her eyes. "Because I couldn't face your disappointment. I thought if I waited until after I told you about the baby, it would hurt less. I was so wrong." My chest ached with grief. I could almost hear our life together fracturing around me. The proposals, the nursery paint, the ultrasound appointments, all tinged now with betrayal. I picked up a final envelope, a small white one with no date. Inside was a folded note. "I choose you, always." It read like a plea, crumpled as though she'd reread it 100 times, fighting to believe it herself. Tears gathered at the corners of my eyes. Emily stood and knelt beside me, pulling me into a slow, careful embrace. "I choose you," she whispered, "and I will keep choosing you, every day, for the rest of my life." I closed my eyes and let the sobs come, his confession letters still open in my lap. In that raw moment, I felt our future hang in the balance. Trust would not be rebuilt overnight, but maybe, just maybe, there was enough love left to forge a new beginning. I didn't know where the next path led, only that I would hold her hand as we found our way through the wreckage, together. In the weeks that followed, our life settled into something we didn't recognize at first, like a photograph faded by time. The outline's still there, but the colors softened by distance and pain. Emily and I fell into a pattern of check-ins and therapy sessions, of long talks over late dinners and shared playlists on our drives to the clinic. The air between us was often tense, each lingering silence a reminder that the past was still alive. shadowing every moment. One evening, I found her sitting in the rocking chair, the nursery door cracked open, the mobile turning slowly above the crib. The baby's midnight cries had finally lulled back to sleep. Emily looked half asleep herself, eyes shining with exhaustion and something unspoken. I slipped in beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, and for the first time since the confession, I let myself simply hold her. "I'm scared too," she murmured, voice half lost in the dark, "that I'll mess this up, that he'll grow up knowing how much I hurt you." I pressed a kiss to her temple. "We're not perfect," I said softly, "but he'll know we tried. He'll know what it means to fight for family." We rocked in silence, the mobile's soft tinkling a lullaby to our fragile hope. When our son Noah was born on a rainy April morning, the world seemed to hold its breath. I stood at her side in the delivery room, squeezing her hand through every contraction, every second of doubt. And when his first cry split the air, something in me cracked open. Years of worry and betrayal and fear pouring out, leaving the bare, raw space of fatherhood. Emily and I shared a look above the bassinet, a look of exhaustion, of joy, of the knowledge that everything had changed. At home, life became a careful choreography of feedings, diaper changes, and midnight lullabies. The crate stayed in the nursery, its lid closed but not locked, a silent testament to the past she'd brought into our marriage, now standing as a marker of how far we'd come. Sometimes I caught Emily lingering by it, hands brushing the wood as she murmured apologies under her breath. I learned to see those moments not as threats but as acts of contrition, reminders that she understood the gravity of what she'd done. One afternoon, months after Pearl Street Counseling had implored us to cultivate new rituals, we painted a small canvas with Noah's handprints, blue and yellow swirls that intermingled in the shape of a heart. We gifted it to Dr. Cole at our final session, our tears not of pain but relief. "Thank you," we both whispered, voices thick, for guiding us back to each other. In the quiet evenings since then, when the baby is asleep and the world feels distant, I sometimes find myself sitting before the crate. I open it, not to relive the letters, but to clear space for new mementos. A lock of his hair, his first tooth in a little silver box, family photos stamped with smiles unburdened. I think of Emily's confession and the ache it brought, but I also think of the work we did. The brutal honesty, the willingness to listen, the slow rebuilding of trust stone by stone. One night, we tipped the crate onto its side and set it against the bookshelf in the living room, where it no longer held secrets but stood as a conversation piece, our story laid bare. Neighbors and friends ask about it, and we tell them, first hesitating, then simply, it reminds us that love is fragile but fightable, that even the deepest wounds can heal if you're brave enough to face the pain. I catch Emily's hand across the coffee table and squeeze it. She smiles, a real one, unguarded. "We made it through," she says. "We did," I agree. "And tomorrow we'll do it all again." Outside, the cherry blossoms bloom anew, and their petals drift through the sunlight like confetti. I gather Emily in my arms on the front porch as Noah's crib quietly hums in the house behind us. The world is still unpredictable, messy, and at times unbearably hard. But in this moment, with our son in our future, and our hearts on the mend, we lean into the promise of tomorrow. Together.